Welcome to A Tale of Two Scribes. I'm your host, Eric P. Bishop. This is a podcast where interesting people come and tell about the stories they've crafted. As for myself, I'm an author. I've created novels, short stories, novellas, and even poetry. If you'd like to find out more about what I've done, please go to my website, ericpbishop.com. Thanks, and enjoy the journey. Welcome to a special episode of A Tale of Two Scribes, and it's a Spear Talk episode as well. So you're getting a twofer in the world of podcast entertainment. What's up, John?
What is up? It's you had this idea a couple months ago. I know with scheduling and stuff, but I thought it was a great idea. And it is a great idea because now we can kind of cross pollinate maybe or a different channel, well, same channel, different podcast. But I think people dig the idea of the writing aspect, the creativity aspect, and hopefully this episode people can kind of figure out where we're both at, or at least I am from a creative standpoint, because I never really get to talk about my side of the creativity, whereas obviously you host a podcast that is steeped in writing and creativity. So, and you're an established author. So,
Well, and we've got some cool things we can at least probably allude to, even if we can't get in details, but we can definitely talk about the creative juices that are happening behind the scenes. So, and the cool thing we can start off with is you are officially now a comic book writer. What's up with that? I mean, hey.
uh, that's such a it's a dream I've always had, but I never figured I would meet someone or have the opportunity to do it. And so it starts back to like my uncle Tommy and my dad. As I got older, they loved all the Marvel, the pop culture, DC, all that stuff, and getting their comic books as kids. And we're talking stuff from the 60s and 70s, and getting all the trading cards and all this crazy like comic booky stuff. I've got older and watched all the Marvel movies, DC movies. I just love everything comic books. The Boys, Watchmen, Frank Miller stuff, Alan Moore, all this stuff. And it's kind of surreal to me because I never had an idea in the last couple of years to actually even do this. It was always in the back burner. But I had that was going on, my whole history with that. On the road with Shinedown, Steve Hopkowitz and Barry Kirch, the drummer. Steve was with the audio department. We'd always look for comic books on days off in comic book stores. And so we'd always trade comic books and kind of figure out new writers, new artists and stuff. And so that kept my blood flowing for the last 7 years as well. Well, it wasn't until I had T.R. Hendrickson on my Spirit Talk podcast where we're talking about his writing, but his career as a tank commander in the actual military and how fast they have always been with tanks. And then we get off that podcast and I go, man, I'd love to. I just love the tank stuff because I wrote the short story about this werewolf attack inside a tank at the end of World War II. And he was like, fuck you, that's rad. He goes, write it, have fun with it. And so literally a couple weeks later, I go back and read the story that I started in the pandemic. And I was like, I'm gonna start giving some characters names. I'm gonna start kind of fine-tuning, making sure like the details make sense. Yes, it's a very supernatural horror, but I want the actual weaponry, the movements, the tactical idea of it to be very steeped in honesty. And so the tank, the Sherman tank, and how fast it could go, the tracks and stuff like that, I want it to be very truthful. Yeah. And so I put it together, and then I see a mutual friend of Chris Cochran and I, Brenton, who's a promoter for Live Nation. He goes, John, hey, my friend Chris, who I was aware of. I've actually done his podcast a couple years ago. And he's looking for short stories for a comic book he's launching. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to send it over. And then from there, it just kind of blossomed this idea where, okay, this part's done. And then where's it go from here? Because it's like the story. I got so excited that now I fleshed out on paper. It's probably a 70 to 80, 100, 80 to 100 page book, short story of this world I've created where now I've got characters and missions and all this side stuff, and it's just been fun to like be walking in a grocery store or like going for a workout and like taking notes on my phone, but I just had this idea for a character slogan, or I had this idea for a mission or something that's going to happen. This is what's happened to this character. This is the background for this character, and it just allows me to like really lead into that creative aspect of my brain that now has a visual component to it. So
Mhm.
seeing those work hand in hand is super rad. And Chris is a phenomenal artist. And yeah, the first glimpse of the Stay Hungry world I'm creating is in the Cult of Machete #1, which came out actually June 8th.
Mhm. Well, from as a friend and someone that's watched you the last couple years kind of blossom with this stuff, because we started talking about writing ideas and writing stuff probably back about 2 years ago now. We're right at around the 2 year mark, and even exchanged some writing with each other. And it's really cool to then see that and I always tell people, you don't know what's going to happen, but you know what can't happen if you don't do something. So to whatever interest you might have, even if it's a fleeting thing, a fleeting idea, try it, and if especially something like writing a short story, you're not talking about writing a full length novel where you're going to devote months, literally months of your life to writing it. You can write a short story even if you don't have good writing chops. You can write it in a weekend. Not that it's a beautiful story in a weekend, but in a weekend you can knock out 2 to 4,000 words. Most capable adults can do that. And if you got something, and if you like for you, you've been able to with your career, with your personality, everything, you've been able to really network out and meet lots of different people. And you never know, like me talking to you right now is because I was on a podcast. You saw that podcast. You had me on your podcast. And then, 2 years later, we've got this connection that 3 years ago, I would have never even dreamed I was hosting a podcast on my own or going to Shinedown shows, like the opportunity you gave me to, have that access. Just shows you that in life, you don't know what's going to happen. But if you limit yourself, and if you don't dream, and if you just are content to sit on your couch and watch Netflix, um, your life's going to pass you by. You're going to miss out on who knows what opportunities.
Yeah, it's also one of those things too where it seems daunting if you're like a first time creator. Now I'm including painting and form of art, musician, whatever it is,
Hmm.
and you're jumping into a world that's already been pre-established by decades and decades of world class people at the top of their game, and obviously some super shitty people in their game. Uh, but it's a world inundated with so many people in your craft, and for you to have the confidence to like jump into that head first,
Hmm.
and that was never an issue with me. I don't care what people think of me. Um, but especially when it comes to art, where I know I'm my toughest critic,
Hmm.
but just to have the confidence to kind of put it out there and have the ego to be like, you know what, screw this. I am putting this out there. Nothing's gonna stop me. I don't care how many rejection letters I get. I don't care how many people pass on it. I know it's a great idea. I know it's a great story. I know it's a great poem. I know it's a great piece of art. I'm just
Hmm.
gonna put it out there. And then if you're true to yourself as an artist, I think you're gonna you're gonna people are gonna gravitate towards you
Yeah.
that believe in you. And that's where the art comes, where it's coming from a place of sincerity, and I think people want that. And if the person behind the art is believable, it only helps the art
Hmm.
itself get out there. And I think with me, people getting to know me over the years know I'm very eccentric, borderline psychotic, uh, but in a way where it's like endearing, where they know what they're gonna get. Like I'm never, sure I have bad days, but I eternalize those bad days so I can still be the version of myself that makes people happy.
Hmm.
And I think that's just with my art. I was you know what, screw this. I'm gonna put it out there. I think this is a great thing. And as you know, in a world that is starving for original ideas,
Hmm.
why not be a creator and an inventor of these cool things and throw it out there?
Yeah.
And so that's been the most fun of this is like being an original person. Because every time you log online, you see a remake of a remake or
Hmm.
uh, a rehashed idea or whatever. It's like I'm not knocking the people that work on those projects, but there's so many other people out there that's creating stuff that I know sometimes I go through like say I look at Breach of Trust. It's on you go to Amazon, you look at your new book coming, and then when you go down and look at the stuff that people recommend these other books or
Hmm.
whatever that section's called, where you start scrolling through, and especially for horror, because I'm a big fan of Stephen King and stuff like that.
Hmm.
I'll get the new Stephen King book, and then I'll go down there. You'll start scrolling through and be like, man, I never would have found this author
Yep.
because it's either self-published or buried in some bookcase somewhere in some Barnes and Noble, unless I picked up this author I enjoy. And
Mhm.
I found some incredible. That's how I found about one of your guests, Dan, the Lair of the Minotaur.
Mm.
Uh, where I'm just kind of like, I never would have found this book anywhere. I never would have found this guy on social media. It's all because I doom scrolled looking for other similar work and authors in
Yep.
the horror fantasy world, and that's why I'm just like, I'm gonna be out there, and just like put this stuff out there. Just
Yep.
keep putting these ideas out there, and someone's gonna find it. It's like,
Right.
am I happy? We'd be lying to ourselves if our stuff didn't get sold by a million times, right?
Mhm.
But the happiness for me is having someone that I don't really know send me a message saying, "Holy shit, this thing is so rad." I never wasn't a comic book fan, but I am now because you're a rad dude and I love your story. I'm here for the whole ride. And that for me is better than some corporation being like, you know what, I want to buy 100,000 copies and burn them.
Yeah.
Sure, I'm getting the sales, but I'm not getting that connection with people
Right.
that are believing in me. And I think that for me is what makes creativity that much fun.
100%. It's funny you said that because I was talking to my son Bruce yesterday, and I mentioned to him that I put the Body Man back out under my brand in January with the publisher going out of business. So I build it as a second edition, same book. I mean, it's trimmer. I trimmed some out, new cover. Well, I'm in that headspace then of you have to start marketing it and doing all the stuff you have to do. So I've been doing Facebook ads since middle of January, I guess, since the Body Man came out. Nothing crazy, but more than paying for themselves, doubling my money pretty much every day. So, and that's drawing a new audience to the Body Man. And literally once a day, I get a message on Facebook that someone says, "Hey, I found your book. I love it. I can't wait for Breach of Trust to come out." And I get some positive thing. Literally once a day, I get at least one of those. And it's like, man, for a book that came out 2.5 years ago, to still be getting a reminder that new people are finding it and people are enjoying it, it gives me a lot of joy, but it also then gives me confidence for where I go forward with Breach of Trust out now that, okay, it's a building thing where, one day I'll have 7 books out there and that person that finds book number whatever will go, oh, he's got 6 more. And then that will get me that audience, hopefully, if I've delivered 6 or 7 quality books, which I will, that I got a new, and they tell someone else. And that it's that snowball effect. But ultimately, and I think we feel the same way on this, ultimately, as much as I enjoy hearing that positive affirmation for what I do, I write for myself. If I finish something I write and I go, damn, I like that, that's the mission accomplished right there. If
Yeah,
other
no,
people
that's
like it, that feels really good too, but it doesn't feel as good as me going, okay, you nailed it. Good job. And of course, that satisfaction is that satisfying feeling I have is pretty fleeting. That's what pushes me to go, okay, do the next thing. Do it better next time.
yeah.
So always hustling.
And people know that, like, any author, anyone that writes knows. I mean, you pick up some books that are super thick, even if the even if it's completely batshit crazy, it doesn't make any sense, terrible writing, the amount of work it takes to put that many words on paper alone, it's like it's a book is one of those things, a painting is an album, comic book. You look at that, it's like the amount of work that goes into even getting to this part where it's even in final form
Yeah.
is so arduous and crazy that it's like you have to respect it. That's why I love. At first, like there's this ego snobbiness when you're like you first hear, I want to write a book. I want to be in Barnes and Noble. I want to be in uh, wherever, and you kind of get like this. Well, that's the way to do it. Well, then before I'm like, oh, self-publishing, like, dumb, like this, no one's to take you seriously. Well, hold
Mhm.
on a second. As you kind of dig deep into that world, I respect almost self-publishers more because they're doing everything is on them. The onus is everything on them. And if people willing to go through, like, walk through broken glass, like John McClane, Die Hard, with their book, and they're willing to do that,
Yeah.
sacrifice the time and energy and money, man, hats off to you. Like that
Yeah.
is super badass, and I just love it. I love the whole process of it. And to kind of go back to what you said about like the building like this platform of books and stuff, people finding old stuff and going through. That's
Mhm.
one of the reasons why the book club, and you were the first one to allude to it, While if you're in the book club for Spirit Talk, I always put the author's first book or a first book in a series in the box because my hope is that people read that and be like, I want to continue the story.
Mhm.
And I know I've got messages from people with Ava Adair and Steve Stratton saying, man, I can't wait to pick up the sequels now because I had no idea. Or people messaging seeing Steve Stratton's prequel novella out with Lance Beowulf going, man, so is this going to be four? Should I read this before I go, well, hold on a second, read this
Yeah.
section, and then this is a prequel. And like, okay, cool, cool. Because I'm just trying to figure out like how do I read these books, and so it's just reading is such a fun thing. And like the version of me in high school and college saying this right now would punch myself in the face. But with the pandemic hits, and I've always loved reading.
Mhm.
So I think there's something romantic and like fun about just getting lost in the story and being a part of that world now. Someone is kind of rad.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's a more intelligent thing to do for your brain. I think television, streaming, watching stuff, it's a good way to kind of maybe relax your brain because you know there's not much involved in it. You're just staring, observing, you know, being entertained essentially. But for reading, you're doing something. You know, you're having to focus on those words. You're turning the pages. You're getting drawn into a world, and I think it just I don't know what the scientific part of it would be, but you're engaging your brain in a different way. So I did want to circle back to what you just said about Steve too, because Steve's one of those people that I love to highlight when I get to talk about. And one of the things is obviously someone that served a full career in the military, did some just badass things and has some great love hearing stories. I love talking to him. We're supposed to have a phone call next week because he's been in Italy and he's been on the road and haven't had a chance to chat with him in a while. Um, but then someone that later in life, you know, Steve's in his, I believe, his late 60s now. And, you know, he didn't get published till he was in his mid to late 60s. And to me, that's that reminder to everyone. And I try to throw it out there of there's no age limit on this. It's not like, well, if you haven't published a book by 25, guess what? Your time's up. You're expired. You're old news. You're an old hag. You're whatever. You're a dude that's past your prime. Um, that's actually the opposite of how publishing works and how whether it's self-published or traditionally published, it's typically what you see is people do it as a second career or they've had a lot of life experiences and then they start working on books in their 30s or 40s or 50s or I know there's people that have got published for the first time. I've mentioned at one of the podcasts. I think the woman was in her late 80s or 90s and she was first time published. And it's just to me, that's that thing of going, and I try to always tell people if you've got a dream, guess what? There's one person that can accomplish that dream for you, and it's the person that's having that dream.
Yeah,
Don't forget that. And man, put down, and I had to do it, and I've talked about it before. I had to put down TV for quite a while. I mean, there's so many times. Again, talking about Bruce, we were talking last night, and he was flipping through whatever Disney, Netflix. He goes, "Dad, have you seen like the Planet of the Apes movies?" And I was just like, the originals? And I was like he goes, "There's a bunch." I go, "Yeah, they remade them, and there's new ones out." And I literally I almost went and saw the new one at the theater a month ago whenever it came
it's
out.
amazing. It's amazing.
I've heard it's great. I haven't seen the other ones because for so long I focused on the craft of writing and telling my stories that something had to get pushed to the back burner. Now, do I watch TV and stuff? Yes. If I sat here and said, I don't ever watch TV, I'd be full of crap, but I don't watch nearly as much as I did 10 years ago. And I'm very selective with it where it's like a late at night, like I'll binge watch a season of something over the course of a week. I don't have the kids, especially on the weekends. Like, you know, I'll stay up till 3 or 4 in the morning and I'll watch 5 episodes of a series. And most series now are 10 episodes and they're done. That's my TV watching now. It's more of just, okay, I don't want to focus on writing now. I need to take a break mentally, so, like Yellowstone, I started Yellowstone way behind the curve. I started it last year. I'm in season 5 now. First 2 seasons were really good. Season 3 was then like, you know, Dallas out in the out in Yellowstone, basically. It was a soap opera. By season 4, I was rolling my eyes. Season 5, now it's like I've invested so much time in this damn show. I need to see
Yes.
exactly how it finishes, and we'll see. I think they're filming the second part now. They already started filming the second
Yeah.
part of
Yeah.
season 5. Is Kevin Costner coming back for the final episode? So now it's like now I'm invested to finish the 5th season just because it's like I need to know what happens to these people. So
Do you find when you watch like TV or obviously when you write like the thriller genre,
Mhm.
like Breach of Trust and Ransom Daughter type stuff, are you or when you read other books in that genre, at least for me, and I know we got other stuff in the pipeline we're doing where I mean I don't even know when we start teasing that per se, but like when we
We can't tease it yet.
right, so but we start doing the stuff, and for me, if I see something on TV or I read about a book, I mentally cross it off the checklist where I don't want to write about this. I can't write about something similar. And it forces kind of me to get super creative.
Mhm.
It's weird because sometimes when I watch like I've read numerous books in the thriller genre, say a submarine or what's a common trope that's a lot of submarine stuff lately.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of the same actions happen. There's a betrayal, you know, who's who, missing sub,
Mhm.
and it's like I get why it works because I love Hunt for October. I love Crimson
Yeah.
Tide. I get UF 571. I get why it works, but I don't need 1,000 books because if you don't do it right, it's all the same to me. It's when I write and try to create these scenes or moments in a book or whatever. I want it to be so memorable, be like, oh my god, that's the first time someone used X as a weapon, or I never realized you could kill something like that, or this is what happens when this type of scenario happens where no one writes about the scenario. Like I had no idea this could happen.
Mhm.
And then we kind of control like the destiny of that, where now we are the gatekeepers to this is how this type of scenario should be played out.
Yep.
And it's like I don't that's why I don't watch a lot of TV. I watch sports. And obviously I love the movies. But in the back of my mind, every time I see something where I'm like that's why I always look at Die Hard or Predator. There's moments in those movies, RoboCop, that are so iconic. But it's the first time you've seen someone get killed that way, or a line uttered, or an action scene set up where it's untouched. It's
Mhm.
perfect, and I visually in my head trying to get that out of my head onto paper and pen, where I'm kind of like, okay, when Billy does his last stand on the log when the Predators come in to get Dutch. It's like that's such you don't even see what happens in the movie, but you know what happens, and it's like that
Right.
type of iconic scene. Or again, McLean right across the broken glass. It's like it's so iconic that how many movies have you seen since that can do that? You can't.
I
No,
know.
there's movies that will make like very tongue in cheek jokes about that
Yep.
part of it, but you can't replicate that. You can't write about it. You can't visually show it because it's already been done perfectly. So
Mhm.
how do we create, or how do you create something that's just as memorable, where someone reads that and goes, "Well, I've already read that Breach of Trust. I'm not. Who gives a who cares about this other? It's not going to be the same."
Yep.
But that's where I'm at trying to go to. Where it's like I love the idea of pushing myself that way, but and I get why people get lazy or just work before I work again. But put some more effort into like what you're doing. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying that everything has to be like some crazy create a new thing,
Mhm.
but if you've got some parts of your story you're trying to do, be original. And if you can't be original, maybe that seed shouldn't be in the book.
So the how part is a good question. So it was something I was worried about when I first started writing my first couple books. Because what concerned me was I've read so many books over the years, especially in the Clancy world, and then of course that became Vince Flynn. But also so many other, so many other series when I was a teenager. I just read everything. I watched a lot of movies too, though. So those are the two things. Those are and I played golf. Those are kind of my three, I guess you could say, hobbies. I was outdoors a lot too, but I read and watched a lot. So I was concerned those first couple books. Am I subconsciously rehashing a scene that I read in Transfer of Power from Vince Flynn? And it concerned me, and what I had to do is at some point in the process, I had to just trust that I was creating this on my own. And maybe I'm taking a blend of 10 different movies and 6 different books, and I'm taking little pieces and constructing it. Because I think in a way we are. Everything's been said. We've had what's the number I saw recently? They believe maybe there's been 100 billion people on planet Earth in the course of our history. Um, so every word has been uttered probably in a very similar context
Correct.
or line. So, and story wise, obviously, we're not there. It's not been, thousands of years of people writing thrillers and stuff like that. Nothing like, but, and we've lost probably a lot of the stories that were just oral traditions and all that have probably happened. Some of them stuck, obviously, but, I think you just have to trust your intuition that what you're putting down is original, and then you just keep the more you come out. And I think you'll notice too when you read stuff back, I got this character named Hans Gruber that I'm throwing out of this skyscraper, and he's got a gun in his hand. It's like, wait, hold on now. I've seen that movie a few times. I think I have that Christmas ornament. Got to take that out. But yeah, you trust the process of just that. But it is definitely a question too of how do you be original? And I think a lot of that, John, just comes down to keep creating. Um, because I think the more you create, I'm at the point now where probably with what I finished writing this summer, and I don't have I can't say it emphatically, but I'm probably over the million word mark. If not this year, in the last couple of years, I've gotten over the million words that I've written. Um, it's a lot of words. It's a lot of time put into it. And some of it's been, publishable. A lot of it's not been publishable. But that's how you get to that point where you get published is you just keep sticking with it. You keep writing it and you let that creativity, I think people let the creativity die. I think life happens. You've got a family, you've got a job, for you've got these responsibilities that come with your career that are daunting. We've joked about it offline where we've talked about some writing stuff and you're like, "Oh, I'll knock this out when I'm out there." And I've spent some time with you on the road and I know that John doesn't have just 4 hours to sit there and be like, "Hey, what's up, people?" You might have a few minutes that you're doing that. Then all of a sudden someone like, "John, I need a pass. This person's coming.
I
John, I
think
need this."
out Shode, outside the four band guys, and obviously the tour manager, I am the most sought after person. And it's super not daunting. The job is super easy for me because you get obviously years of practice and you get good at it. But
Yeah,
it's one of those things where it's like you can't you have to be so on your toes with that stuff that
right.
you have to be locked in. And so that's how sometimes with me, I'll get to the bus that night or the day off next day in a hotel, and I'll just like binge note take. And sometimes in my bunk, hey, I thought of this idea earlier in the
Mhm.
day type stuff, but like it's like you said, it's tough to kind of like be creative when you have life happening around you as well.
Yeah. And so
It's
then I think people have to do is they just find that window where they can sit down and I've mentioned it before. I use my phone a lot. I'll make a lot of notes because I basically have two projects I can't talk about that I do to some degree make regular notes on. I have a novel coming out later this year, two novels I'm planning to come out next year, and another novel that I started a year and a half ago that I want to go back to. So at any given time, if I'm on a walk, and it's not every day, it's not every time I'm on a walk, but all of a sudden something will pop in my head and I'll be like, oh man, this would be a good scene for Merci in the novel for next year. That's already a third done. So I'll just make a note. Hey, make sure Merci, does X, Y, and Z. And that's as simple as it is. And then what I do is when I'm in those writing phases of this career or this process, I'll go back to those notes I might have made over the course of months and those kind of coalesce in my brain as I then start writing. Oh yeah, in this chapter it'd probably be good to throw this scene in here where Merci throws this jerk off, the Empire State Building or whatever it might be. So, but yeah, you find your way. You find your way of doing it. You find your window. But the most important thing is to do it. Like what you're doing now with releasing poems and putting poetry out there. It's and not simple in what you're doing, but it's a simple gesture to put creativity out there, but it's a spark. It's a spark for you. And I think probably the feedback you're getting, and I'd like you to speak to it, is probably motivating you to continue to do it. But I think also for those people that take the time to read your poetry, um, it can be a spark for them to maybe do something similar or whatever their creative outlet is can be a reminder of, hey, put time into something outside of what your normal mundane life is,
yeah.
because you get a lot of joy in that.
I've uh I've got messages from people that have written poetry over the years and don't ever put it release it. And last night I got one. She finally launched her page, and it's very dark and somber, and a lot of themes are like about neglect, depression, generational fear,
Mhm.
stuff like that. Where she's like, I just don't have the confidence to do this. But I read the poem like, these are so badass. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sorry you have to write this stuff, but and I get it's part of your therapy, but this might help someone else. And again, it all goes back to that's the type of stuff I like hearing about from people. I've got reached out by a couple of agents and people like, hey, like if when you're ready to do a book, um, we'd love to do a book or like love to see your other work because if you have hundreds of these poems and you can knock these out, and some of the ones I've been doing a lot of the ones recently, I'll be on a walk or doing something, and something will happen to mine where I triggers a moment in time, a
Mhm.
breakup, a death in the family, a very specific event my cousins and I did, or something where then I could literally sit down and type it out within 5 6 minutes.
Yeah.
And like, there's no my poetry school because there's no rhyme or reason to it. You make the rules, right?
Right.
And I love the idea of how it's just a free thought, but when you put that stuff out there, again, it allows people into your world to kind of see how what makes you tick. But
Mhm.
again, it allows you to be authentic. And if John's doing this, some guys it's people look at me and sometimes be like, dude, this guy's scary looking psychopath. Then if he's able to do this, why can't I? And it's just a form of therapy. And I think for me,
Right.
I'm not saying I'm depressed or um I mean, yeah, depressed, there's no mental health stuff. It's more these are all feelings we all have every day.
Yeah.
Anger, sadness, happiness, fear, neglect, stuff like that, where it's like just put it out there and who gives a shit.
Yep.
And so with the poetry writing, the comic book short story writing, and this nonfiction fiction writing stuff, it all like kind of helps each other thing, like you said, where
Mhm.
writing a poem is different than writing a comic book, and writing a comic book is different than writing a new thriller novel or a autobiography or whatever it is you're working on. Where I'm able to kind of like jump around between all three,
Yeah.
and sometimes I get the mood. The poems they can come and go as they come through, but when it comes to like writing a book, fiction or nonfiction versus a short story comic book, it's like for me sometimes I get the thing where it's like, well, I have this whole idea in my head. I have all these notes. I'm just gonna plow through this initial idea and get it out of my head.
Mhm.
Because I think that stuff is fleeting for me. Where a poem, if I don't feel it, I'm not gonna write it.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
there's been times where I'm like, oh, no, I don't feel it.
Yeah.
I don't have the words. I can't pull the words I want to say out of my head where I can genuinely feel confident this is what my thought was.
Mhm.
But yeah, the writing it's just fun, man. Just I tell everyone, just put it out there. No one cares. Like
I
there,
can't
it's
I can't reach it, but I got a poetry book literally like 2 feet outside my reach where I just randomly pick up sometimes and start writing poems, and then there's a couple of them that I started, and I got about halfway through it, and it left me. The idea left me, the words of what I wanted to say, and I just said, "Okay, that's fine. It's a blank page that I'll finish one day," and it's the poetry is not as important to me. It was like 20 years ago. I used to write a lot of poetry, 25 now. And then I just kind of more transitioned into writing, but it is I think writing is therapy. Like I've told you, I think the other day I was working on a newsletter that will come out that came out on publication day. This will come out like we'll air this a couple days after, so breach of trust will be out. So my newsletter will be out. Well, I'm writing a little thank you section in there. Just I haven't written a newsletter in several months. I know there's a lot of people that supported me with the body man that are still on board and support me with breach of trust. Well, I get these cool opportunities to thank people, and what I'm doing in the newsletter, besides thanking them, is telling people, and this is say it to everyone that's listening here too, is if you pick up one of my books, please, 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 even maybe before you even read the book, go read the acknowledgement. Because to me, that's the section where I get to thank people that have been instrumental during that period of my life. And those the acknowledgments will probably change over the course of books. There's people that it's not anything personal that they're mentioned in one book and they're not mentioned in the next book. It's just kind of what's going on. There's a John Guarnieri line, of course, in there in the acknowledgments because you've been super, encouraging and helpful, and you've been my friend. Um, I love that I get those opportunities and the acknowledgments to thank people, to also express what was going on. Breach of Trust was written primarily during a period of time where I was going through or just went through a divorce. So there was still a lot of raw stuff going on in there. there was things probably in the book that were real things or elements of real things that I gave to characters as therapy. I'll give this one away, and I've told people I've never told. I had the question come up years ago, like, "What'd you do with your wedding ring?" I was married for 18 years, and so as I'm going through the divorce, I stopped wearing it when we separated, and then it took like a year plus to get divorced. So I had it just sitting somewhere for a while, and I had time to kind of think about it. What am I going to do with this wedding ring? Am I going to sell it? Am I going to keep it for my kids? Am I going to do this? So I kind of finally came up with this is appropriate. And I had people ask me, "What are you gonna do with it?" And I said, "You know what? I'm gonna put it in a novel." So in Breach of Trust, if you get to that point, there's a character that gets asked this question of, "What did you do with your wedding ring?" And this person explains what they did with it. That's 100% what I did with my wedding ring, if you read that section of the book. So that to me, that's some fun, probably therapy. You probably read that scene, you're probably like, "Dear God." But that's what helps, and that's what lets things vent out, and that's how you express yourself, and it also gives a little realism to your stories because, 95% of it might be just made up stuff in your head, but yeah, there's that 5% that you either know someone. Like, I have a couple stories towards the end of the book that are 100% stories, though people they gave me permission to use them. One of them's a real big story at the end, about the Iraq War, told from the person that made the phone call is all I'll say. And I got it on audio that I recorded the whole story. I told it in written form. I sent it to them. I said, "You cool with me saying it this way?" They're like, "Rock on, go with it." And it's like, cool. I have a story in there that people are gonna be like, "Oh, cool story." No, real story, just fictional character telling it. So that
It's
stuff's a blast.
funny you bring up the wedding ring because the other day I was doing like compost, like dropping stuff on the wood pile in the back of the yard, and it's funny because when I was going through my divorce, I was still wearing the wedding band, but one day I was out in the compost pile. This is obviously when I was back living in Maryland, and my wedding ring fell off into the compost pile. And within like 1 second, I was like super upset and sad. Like I can't find like this pile. I can't find it. And then within 2 seconds later, you know what? I go screw it. Why do I care? And like I left it in the compost pile. And so whoever owns that house now has my wedding ring in their compost pile. And it's like it's weird that I literally thought about that for the first time the other day. I've never told that story, and here you are talking about the wedding ring. It's like it's uh it's weird how that life is, man.
Well, when Gollum finds that ring in Maryland and all of a
Yeah.
sudden we nuke Russia and Russia nukes us, well, no, damn it, it was all John Guarnieri's fault for letting the ring, fall in
Well, when
the
he
compost pile.
summons the devil by putting that thing back on his finger.
I think the devil's already here. So
Yeah. Well, to kind of go back to what you touched upon, and I don't want to get into the politics right now, but the economy sucks, right? And so if we're
yeah,
going to be putting art out, and time is one thing, but people spending money on whether it's a book, a Kindle, comic book, digital album, whatever it is, a painting, it's like it's people have to believe in the artist. And
yeah,
it's like tough to it's unfortunately, there's a price to get access to that stuff because people's hard work and effort needs to be covered. But it's like
mhm,
for me, it's like I'm trying to come up with a way where, like, even with the poem stuff, where just get snippets of like the art where it's just out in the ether, right? It's like
yeah,
I wish there was a way to. I'd love for me to be able to put out my entire short story where you actually see you'd see more of the entire world. Comic books can't be you
mhm,
can't do everything from a story because the thing would be too big, right?
right,
But it's like, but I can't because I'm like, it's my baby. I don't want to be out there just for this. There's a price to it, right?
mhm,
But that idea, which might come off as selfish, you also have to look at the consumer who you think might like this, where it's like that balance act of like making sure people have access to your art.
yeah,
And it's such a fine line. I know it's like you and I always talk about, well, price points for stuff, or why can't we do this way? It's like, well, hold on. Time is money, energy is money,
yeah,
product is money, and you still have to, like, if this is going to be a job or supplemental income, you still have to make it work for the artist itself. So it's like
yeah,
it's just such a fascinating, like, it's a unique predicament. It's a worthy predicament to be in. but it's one of those things where I let people subtly know, say, hey, the effort and time and energy, like the creatives need to be paid as well. And
Hmm.
I think that's why I think some people are like, well, it costs so much to buy this book, or why is this book so expensive? Well, if you worked 12 months or 18 months or 2 years on a piece of work, not to take away from your job, but this is what this equals. And
Yeah.
so I don't know, it's just I'm always trying
Well,
to wrap my head around it.
couple things would be, first of all, you know where the term starving artist came from. So I mean it's
Correct.
and we're now in that world where we're trying to put out product that are our creativity, our written words, and it's a tough gig. We're both fortunate that we have very well paying day jobs, or our careers, that the writing can be something. And I tell people all the time, I do finance by day and I moonlight as a writer. Could I flip that around and do couple hours here and there of finance and writing full time? Maybe, maybe. But I also, and I've told you offline, how many books I have to sell a month to replace my financial analyst income. That number, which I won't reveal on the podcast, but it's a daunting number. It's not 50 books a month, folks, that you have to sell because, to your point, yeah, people don't, and I get it. I'm a consumer as well. I think nowadays it crosses my brain, do I want to spend that much money for a book? Totally works for me too. But at the other side of me knows, I know how much effort that people put into it. So when people say, "Well, you wrote something, put it out there for free," well, that's cool. But if you're trying to make a living doing that, you can't put stuff out for free. Even like Kindle, like this month, the month of June, Kindle selected the Body Man for a Kindle deal, and they set the price. I had nothing to do with it. So they set the price at 2.99, which I think for an ebook that's been out for 2.5 years, okay, that's a fair price. Some people think 2.99 is expensive for an ebook. Why would I pay 2.99 when I can get a 99 cent or a free ebook? But then, there's a lot of big name authors coming out with books this month. Carr's coming out with one. I think Thor's got one out next month. Their ebooks from the big publishers, those are like 14.99.
Oh yeah, like the Michael Crichton, James Patterson book.
Eruption.
Uh, yeah, which I gotta read because I just love that idea.
Yeah.
But I went on there to Amazon and I was like, well, I'll just get a hardcover, and I'll just buy. I bought the hardcover, but the hardcover was I think 24, 25 something. The
Right.
soft cover was 30 something
Yeah.
because they're pushing the hardcover, and then the Kindle was like, man, this is more expensive than actually some of like the hardcover books of like other authors in that genre. Where I'm like,
Yeah.
this is more expensive than a Stephen King book.
So, promotion for someone that we have an interaction with. This came in the mail the other day, hardcover.
Yeah,
I bought it for
great. Oh,
$9.99.
it's a
So,
great deal. It's
big
amazing.
name ebooks for 14.99 when I can buy a hardcover from a great author for 9.99. So,
Correct.
the devil takes you home. So, if you don't have the devil takes you home, folks,
It's worth it.
get it. But yeah, again, it's such a fine line because I do think about it because I'm a consumer as well. I try to think about it from a consumer standpoint, but I'm also now a small business owner. So I look at it and go, like you were alluding to earlier, when you go down the publishing route yourself, you're not just submitting a manuscript to an agent who's then selling it to a publisher. You are creating a manuscript, and if you do it right, you're bringing in people, or you're doing it professionally. Well, I'm bringing in a cover person, I'm bringing in a professional editor, I'm hiring for marketing to some degree. So those are all costs that I have to shell out long before. And I'm blessed, the breach of trust when we record this is out now, but up until the last 3 months I've been getting pre-orders, and my pre-orders were higher than the Body Man. Pre-orders were really solid numbers. I still won't see that money for 2 months for all the pre-orders. So it's not like, well, I was recouping the money that I paid out. So I paid for an editor months ago. I paid for a
How
cover a long time ago.
right, right. And
Had to pay it out.
how come you can't pre-order the physical copies of a book like that?
I've not cracked that code yet. Obviously, there's publishers out there that do it. I think they have to use a different medium from Amazon. I'm still, and I've asked a lot of authors too,
Yeah.
of how do we. Now, I know someone that did it, and they did it through their pre-order is available for their paperback, and I think they did theirs through Draft to Digital is the company they use. So there's other companies out there that you can use that will get you pre-orders out there. And that's the one thing that I've not been able to, my Google searches and asking people, I've not figured out, why will Amazon not let self-published people put pre-order because if you can do it for an ebook, I don't know why there would be a methodology
Well,
to
it seems like it would help, like, to give Amazon a heads up, "Hey, we're gonna have to print 700 copies of this first
yeah,
week." Like,
100%. I don't know why. I can't their help line has been beneficial in the past, but I know a lot of them are just I can't ask that question to the customer service reps because they're probably not going to have the answer. So, Jeff Bezos, I know you're listening. What's up with that, dude? Give us pre-orders for hardcovers and paperbacks. We're going to make you more money. You can buy a bigger yacht. You can sign, the Body Man and Breach of Trust, on Amazon Prime and all that stuff. Come on, dude, get with
because
it.
I think if you come to, like, bundling, like, if I'm supporting you as a friend or any of these other author friends I have, if I have the opportunity to get the ebook, hardcover, softcover, and they could do some cool bundle, I'm gonna do all 3.
Yeah,
So,
I
like,
know.
that's why I'm like, I'm always curious. That's why I saw it the other day. I'm like, well, I'm just gonna go there because I had said to you, I haven't pre-ordered the book yet, not realizing I already pre-ordered the digital. I thought I had already forgot to pre-order, like, the hardcover, softcover, and
Gotcha.
now I get to Amazon, I'm like, I don't even have the option here.
Yeah. So, and speaking of the bundling thing, I had a mutual author friend reach out, and they were asking about when I'd have my physical copies for Breach of Trust and hardcover that I could sell, like website or put on the Spear Talk site. And I told them the time frame, and they're like, "Well, I'd really like to get a hardcover Body Man and Breach of Trust. Can you work some kind of a deal?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah. If I'm mailing 2 books out, and I know what my profit margin is on either of those." If someone wants to buy 2 of them, man, I'll take the profit margin for the what would be for 1 to then send the second one out. I'll still make the same amount of money as I would on 1. I'm not gonna lose any money. I won't make
Right.
double, but if that gets 2 of my books out, yeah, I'll do a package deal, and, no qualms with doing stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
but again, that circles back to the creative side, and when you go down the path of publishing yourself, you wear every hat, even if you outsource, which you have to do, or I do, I outsource stuff. But when it comes down to it, you're still involved intimately in every detail of what are you going to charge for prices? Are you going to offer? Now, there's some authors that don't deal with signed copies. They go to a bookstore, they sign copies, or maybe they partner with a local bookstore, and which is a great idea, actually. Send them to a local bookstore. The local bookstore you go in once a week, sign 10, 20, 50, 100 copies, they mail them out. I had trouble getting local people with the Body Man kind of come on board because it was with a smaller publisher. It was a little bit more of a challenge, I guess, for them to get copies because I think they couldn't return them or whatever the specifics were behind the scene. It wasn't simple. They weren't on board to like, hey, I'll come to you for any, and I'll send everyone to your bookstore for signed
Yeah.
copies. I went to multiple ones local here, and they didn't want to. They weren't interested, and so I just said, well, screw it. If the demand's also not going to be thousands of them, if it's only dozens or 100, I'll just offer 'em my website. Yeah, it takes me time every night to fill the orders, make sure it gets through PayPal and get the envelopes, but I want to give people the option. And if I would love to have the problem of one day there's such high volume that I can't do it in house, that it has to run through a bookstore, or you and I build a bookstore, and that's where all of our stuff goes through. Cool. I'd love to have that problem, but it's not my problem now. So the reality right now is I can keep doing it the way I'm doing it. I can offer people signed copies, and that's also a niche kind of thing where not everybody wants a signed copy. And a lot of people where the market's gone to in the last couple of years, and I see it now on a daily basis when I look at the sales reports, is so much of it has gone to ebook. Ebook is one of those things where the vast majority of the consumers now are just getting it on ebook. And that's where, and I know we've talked about it before, I'm offering all my books on Kindle Unlimited. So a step away from ebook is that you pay a monthly fee, and any book that's on that Kindle Unlimited plan, you as many books as you can read in 30 days. I think it's 14.99 or sixteen ninety
Yeah.
nine is the price point. Um, from a consumer, I get it. It makes a lot of sense. So if you read 20 books a month, well, buying 20 ebooks, especially if they're regularly priced, not even the 14.99 ones and not the 99 cent, but if they're, in the middle of 3.99 up to 6.99, buying 20 of those is expensive. If you can pay $20 a month and read 20 of them, that's what you're going to do.
Right.
So yeah, but you learn so much about the process. Too much in a way, but not really. 'Cause I think all that knowledge, all that information just helps you going forward. It helps your decision-making process, but it does take away from your writing, you know? You and I have been talking about and working on stuff for quite a while, and a lot of it just kinda just stays on the surface there of, "Oh, I gotta get back to that. Oh, I gotta dive back into that." Well, there's 20 other things that I've gotta get done for Breach of Trust or that I gotta get done for
Yeah,
my fall release. So,
but I think it all goes back to the if it's organically done, it's believable, that people want
yeah,
that believability behind the art, and I love the fact we don't rush through our ideas we have. I know there's a
right.
couple ideas, at least one this year that's people are going to hear a lot more about, but
Yep.
you're kind of like, there's no rush. That's why, like, for me, it's like people are like, hey, I'm trying to get this deadline. You know what? The deadline was there just for a placeholder for myself and kind of like get some things in place, but there's no rush. Let's just do what you think is happy, and
Right.
then we gotta bump something. Who cares? Like the art comes first, and then just make sure it's done how you want it done. I don't want to rush any of that. That's why it's like with deadlines and stuff. I'm always just like, ugh. That's why I think I didn't really like the reading writing aspect of college, even though I was very good at it. The idea was attached to a deadline. It had to be done by this time. Where
Mhm.
I wish I could go back and listen to my old like college papers and stuff and be like, man, I wish I had time to build on this idea because I think I
Mm,
could have taken this even further. Um, but yeah, I love the process of it. It's super fascinating.
yeah. Well, and again, we've talked about it before. The creativity begets creativity. So once you start down that path, and once you start writing, and once you start doing poetry and short stories and novels, and you know, everything else that you're doing, I think it has that snowball effect where that
Yes.
pulls you into other ideas, and that can pull you into other directions you never even considered. Um, so I can't talk about a project, but the project that I've been working on, I had the idea months ago for a song aspect of it. Okay, how would I turn this into a song? Fortunately, thanks to you, I know a really good songwriter from the band Shinedown. So who do I reach out to? But reach out to Eric and say, okay, what's the process? How's that work? How do I create a song? And he was fortunate. I was fortunate to have that connection where he told me, and he told me get the music first. Get the music before you get the because I was like, do I write the lyrics? Do I write it as a poem? And I was kind of just trying to understand that creative process of how you tackle songwriting. And so it was great because it opened up this whole other thought process to me of this is how you write songs. I eventually have abandoned that idea for currently for this next couple months. I'm not doing the song portion because I'm just not there musically where I can pull the stuff together and I need to get the other piece done. But again, it's for at least me, and I don't know if that works for you. When I go down a new venue, a new avenue, whether it's songwriting or short stories or novels, if I can't get it off the ground, I let it percolate in my head somewhere, and I might not get to it. Again, we've been talking about some things, writing things and ideas for a year, couple of years now. Um, that's cool to me. That's not like, okay, John, if we don't get this done in 6 months, the idea is dead. No, maybe it takes a year before we can even be like, oh, what if we do this? That's good. I mean, I've got that novel that you know what the premise behind it is. That kind of came from a chapter from Breach of Trust that I took out. There's a whole story based on that one chapter. And I wrote like 30,000 words of that book back, a year and a half ago. And then I put it aside. And again, I make notes every now and then on it. I've picked your brain on some Secret Service questions that you can answer. That's open source stuff. And, that story, I want to finish telling that story, but I'm also okay to put that story aside for a period of time. And when that's right, when things line up, when my brain's back in that mindset, guess what? I'll dive into it. And the other thing too is I have the confidence I can go back at that point and work on it and finish a project. And I think for you, you're probably seeing that now is once you start down that path, I think that apprehension you have, that anxiety of am I good enough? Can I tell these ideas out? Once you start putting those ideas out, like once you're published, once you've got a comic book, you got Cult of Machete out now. Once you get one out, for most people, that builds the confidence to know you can do it again. And I know
Yeah.
some people put something out and they're more scared after they put that first one out, maybe because of just their own internal anxieties and stress of, okay, what are people going to say about what I do next? But man, that's the thing that you have to push aside and go, okay, guess what? You got to the, and to me it should be a motivation for people, because once you know you can get to the finish line once, you can get there again, and maybe you can get there faster. Maybe you can do a
Yeah,
better job the next time because you've got that experience, just like running a marathon.
right.
Finish the first marathon, because maybe, finish a half marathon, because then you can probably build yourself up to a full marathon.
Well,
But
you'll
yeah,
figure out the strategy to be successful in that race.
yeah,
So, no, I 100%.
absolutely. And there's a strategy. There's a strategy behind, like we were talking earlier, about the writing process, the process of writing, also the business side of it. There's a huge that's why the publishing industry has got the word industry at the end of it. It is an industry. It's a business. It's the part that I knew nothing about when I wrote Vengeance, my first novel in 2014. I thought I did something amazing, and I still stick by that story, but I didn't know the publishing side of it. Then I spent the next year trying to get an agent, trying to learn the publishing industry, and then I realized this industry sucks. Wow, does this suck? And okay, two ways to take care to handle that. Okay, this industry sucks. I'm done. I'm not going to try to publish. Or, okay, how do I make it work? How do I take that initial disgust of how hard it is to get published, and how do I find a way to get published? Who do I need to meet? What do I need to write different next time? It opens up a litany of options for you, but you've got to get that first step done before you can figure out what your next step is.
No, I love it. How do you, I don't know if I've ever asked you this, but how do you, I know you do like art giveaways and stuff. You People read the book and stuff and tell you how they think about it before it goes on sale. But how do you like decide like what authors you send the book to for your, is it based on trust of people you know who are gonna
Mm,
give you your honest assessment? Like somebody Ava Adair, who I would trust to review a recipe I was typing, right? So it's like
mhm.
she'll tell you the recipe sucks or it's great.
Yeah.
So, but is that how you kind of reach out to like get like the not validation, but like honest assessments from authors that like when you look at the back of a book, like it's always just like, hey, do Stephen King book, and you'll see like excerpts from other horror writers, right?
Hmm.
Gabino, his son Joe Hill, Peter Benchley types, people like that, where it's like,
Yeah.
okay, this is a that's believable. But how do you is it like how do you decide like who is going to help like shepherd like your project organically? Like it's for me, it's like the comic book world doesn't really have. I say influencers because I don't know another word for it. Where
Hmm.
you can send a comic book out. This is something Chris and I are talking about to people who are going to be like pimp out your book or project and
Yeah.
be behind organically like love it. It's like how do you find those people where it's like because it's one of those things where it's like I don't want to. I don't know if some of the reviews books or work for a living. I don't know if I trust their review
Yeah.
because it's their job, right?
Right.
Does that make sense?
No. So
So they're paid to do that. Where I want an honest reception from a if I was a comic book guy that and I got a package in the mail with this presentation of this book and this cool stuff, I'd be like, holy shit, this people get it. This is badass. And I'm not you're not being paid, but this is a cool thing you're gonna get. I
right.
think your reaction, the person reviewing your work, I look at that more look at that like, this is what I believe, as opposed to a guy that writes for the Cincinnati Press reviewing books that he this is like it's I don't know if I'm describing that correctly.
No, you are. It's a loaded question. It's loaded in the sense of some review, like for reviews, Kirkus reviews. There's different review companies out there.
Yeah.
Um, they'll charge you for a review. Now they might not charge maybe I don't know. I don't know if they charge the Brad Thors and the Vince Flynn legacy writers. I don't know if those get charged. The Tom Clancy legacy writers. I know for smaller ones though, you pay for your review. I've never paid a dime for a review. I try to hold my marketing budget pretty close to my chest and make sure if I'm going to spend it, I'm going to get a bang for that buck, which is no guarantee. I've been fortunate this year with Facebook meta ads. They've done really well for me. But that's just learning the process of how the ads work. And I've had help with that. Charles Hack was a huge help. So major props out to Charles, who's a great writer in his own regard, and he's a good marketer. Um, James Razone's been really helpful. I had him on the Tale of Two Scribes
Yep.
podcast recently, and he's turned his writing into a massive business. So you can pay for reviews. So keep it away from the marketing. Pay for reviews, and then also when it comes to like, so for originally for the Body Man, I had Don Bentley gave me my review, which it was something I had sent to Don. I met him at a conference, so I sent to him before I got the publishing deal, and I gave it out to about a half dozen authors I think I knew at the time, and I think about half of them actually got back with me and gave me some kind of a blurb. And the publisher, I gave those to the publisher, and the publisher decided and got Don's permission to put Don's blurb on the original cover for the Body Man. I decided to keep it off the second edition, partly for
Aesthetics. Yeah.
spacing, and also because then, well, this is it's a second edition. The book sold really well for a first. I didn't have high expectations for putting it back out, and I said I don't know if that putting that blurb on there is going to generate any additional interest. I did do one for Ransom Daughter's kind of behind me. Um, Adam Hamdy, who's a good friend of mine, was kind enough to give me a blurb for that one. Breach of Trust, I just wanted Breach of Trust to stand on its own. I had some blurbs I could have used, and I didn't want to use any. I said, I don't blurbs are one of those hard things that I'm on the fence about. I know people swear by them, but me personally, do I pick up a book at does Gambino have one? He does. Okay. He's got
Yeah.
Stephen Jones on it. Okay. Do I pick up a book though at the bookstore and go, "Oh, Stephen King blurb this book, I'm going to buy it." No, that doesn't even cross my brain. Does it work for some people? I'm sure it does. Absolutely. Um, so, in long form, sorry to answer your question, is you end up going with your network of who you know and ask them, and it's intimidating. Do you want to read my book? Will you give it a blurb? Because, then that vulnerability kicks in of what if they don't like it? They're probably not going to write me a negative blurb that says, this sucks, look for a bridge and jump. Of course not. And if they did, actually, you might want to put that on a cover. That might actually
Oh
get
hell
some eyes
yeah.
to it. Be like, hell yeah, this dude does need to jump off a bridge. Let's buy this book. I mean, maybe that would work. So we might want to try that for a future project. We'll just come up with the craziest. I haven't said this on air before. I had a back and forth years ago. I won't say who the author is. Number one New York Times best-selling author. We interacted more years ago on a regular basis. I think there might have been some inebriation or something going on, but we started this evening of going back and forth and writing negative blurbs about each other's books.
Hell yeah.
And like, oh my God, I couldn't put those on air. I'd probably be, banned, all the bad stuff. I would be taken off the air. But funny. It was just funny. And it was done in a lighthearted manner. But and it was just one of those fun experiences of like, what's the stupidest, nastiest, dumbest thing you can say about someone's book? And those were the blurbs we wrote for each other. So it was a kind of a fun, cathartic experience. Um, uh, Sometimes people, like for me, what I did with Breach of Trust was I did have some legit authors read it, and they were really kind, and I even got some blurbs from them. I decided to go a different direction with Breach of Trust, and because the readers had been so kind and generous with the Body Man, I wanted to have reader blurbs for Breach of Trust. So I reached out. I ran a promo on my newsletter or whatever back in January or February, and I just wanted people to kind of kick the tires one more time because it's a book that people that don't know the story behind it was I thought Breach of Trust would come out a year after the Body Man, and I was promoting it that way. Well, the publisher rejected Breach of Trust. Basically, you can do better. And I mean,
Do we
I
talk
had
about this guy, or is it still?
nah, don't even. I don't want to waste the airspace with it. But put it this
Okay.
way: people that I trust that are very open with me on whether the bullshit meter hits. We're good. They're going to tell me if it's good or bad. They were all. I sent the publisher's response to them and said, "What am I missing here? I thought I had a winner on it." And they're like, "This guy doesn't know what he's talking about." It's a great book. Don't listen to this. So then it's like, okay, well, what do I do? Well, then I basically said, let me out. And the quick version is I said, I want out of the contract. I want to have breach of trust back to me. Well, I won't give you the body man back. That's cool. No problem. You published the body man. I signed the deal with the body man, but I didn't want to then be stuck with you for the rest of my life. And I want breach of trust to come out. You don't want it to come out. I want it to come out. And the publisher was cool with me, let me out of the contract. I got the rights back for anything future. I didn't have the rights back for the body man. Well, then 6 months later, publisher goes out of business. So I get the body man rights back. So all that to say, I then reworked the book to I went through it a few times. I could change this. This would be better. A year passed, so I had time to work on it. Well, then when I took the version that people are going to read now, of Breach of Trust, I wanted everyday Joe Blow readers to see what they thought. I wanted, and some from are authors as well, but I wanted my core audience to read the book and tell me exactly what they thought. And then I said at the end of the email to them, if you'd be so kind, if you like it, if you don't like it, tell me you don't like it. I want the truth. But if you like it, write me a blurb and I'll promote it. I'll use your blurb. And so that's what I did. And I had, I think, 13 people out of 14 read it, come back to me, give me a blurb. And that's the got the version here. It's hard. It'll be too hard to see it, but basically those blurbs are here in the, I think, like the third page of the book. I've got the blurb, third and fourth page, I've got the blurbs of those people listed. So when you read the blurbs for breach of trust and what people say about it, and I put them online, I'll have them on my website as well going forward. Those are real readers. I didn't pay for a review. They were kind enough to read the book. Some of them found little typos or little things like, I don't think the character would do that or in that way or
Yeah.
that. I had some people technically tell me that's not legitimate of what like the classification would be for that particular document. So I had a couple like really good, like, oh man, I didn't catch that. Thank you. But then I used their blurbs. And to me, again, I'm biased saying this, to me, that's the highest praise you can get. And it's not knocking other writers, but I'm concerned about what the readers are going to think. There's some blurbs that happen in the publishing world that aren't real. The people don't really write a blurb. That happened, and I've been told that from multiple
Oh,
people.
I believe it because there's no way. I've seen the reason I bring that up. I was going through a store the other day and I picked up like all the same kind of action thriller genre, and all these books are obviously came out at the same time, but they're all 300 to 600 page books. And four of the books I picked up, three of them had the same reviewer on the back. And I know that person obviously reviewed other books. So, but there's no way you can organically read a book and have that quote on there and have it be believable. Like, that's why I'm always just like, for me, I don't know, like, how does someone read something and digest it and come up with a one or two sentence blurb that sums up why they love this book?
It's hard to. I've done because I've been asked to do that in the last couple of years on multiple books, and it's intimidating. I think it's more intimidating to do that than to write my own book, because I want to sound cohesive with what I'm saying, but then how do I put together? And I think the art of writing a good blurb is a challenging art to kind of in one or two lines or sometimes two or three words. So again, I want the overarching feel to be of not knocking blurbs here, but they're not always all they're cracked up to be. They're definitely hard to write a good blurb. I think it would be really hard to write a good blurb if you don't like the story. That's a challenge. How do you say
Right.
something? To me, when I read something and I have nothing nice to say about it, I'm not the dick that's going to go out there and write a 1-star review and be like, John, you suck. Go jump off a bridge. I would never do that. Even if my brain were like, John sucks. You need to jump off
Yeah.
a bridge. I would never say that to anybody. That's what an asshole does. And I could be an asshole, but I'm not an asshole
Well, the
in my
reason I
core.
guess,
So
yeah,
you
and
don't
I
say
get
anything at all. Just you don't say anything. So if someone asks me to write a blurb and I don't like the story and I've not faced that yet, but man, I get I don't know. I don't know what I'll say. I don't know if I'd be like, good job. Well, that's probably not a good blurb, and I don't know if I believe it's a good job. So yeah,
right.
that's a
And I
tough
guess
one.
the reason why I brought it up is because I got these awesome reviews from like Ava Adair, Mark Elliott, and some other people that are traditional authors in that community that read
Yeah.
the comic book, the digital. And Chris and I were talking. He was like, "Man, this is so rad! Like these are like established people." I go, "We should just make up the rules here. Why do we have to have a comic book reviewer? Why can't we? Comic books are for everyone, and whether it's a musician or movie star or podcaster, real people that have an audience that want to read the stuff. These are the people we should be looking for reviews from,
Yeah.
as opposed to sending some guy to pay. Oh, he reviews nerd.com. We'll pay him $100 to review your stuff. It's like, well,
Right.
he's obligated if I'm paying for service to give me a positive review, and that is not. If my art sucks, I don't want someone telling me it's good. So that's why I'm kind of like trying to understand how the review world works, because
Yeah. So
at least
I've worked close the last couple years with not close. I mean, I know some of the guys, and they've been kind to review my books, best thriller books. Um,
yeah,
and
they're great dudes.
they're great, and they're the secret behind the curtain there is they're not like this paid reviewers. These are readers who also happen to really love books and love to say, "Hey, what I thought." And I know of an instance. I won't name the author, but I know of an instance because I know the review team really well that they had a book from a really well known established author that the person that the reviewer, the guy that the Joe Blow guy that read it didn't like it and basically put together a review that was not eviscerating the book, but it wasn't super kind. Well, that pissed the author off that basically they got what they viewed as a negative review. And it's like, well, but that's part of the issue. You can't put it out there. And if you're getting a paid review, yeah, I'd expect if I pay for a review that they're not going to say Eric Bishop sucks. He should jump off a bridge. I'd want my $500 back or whatever I paid that monkey. It's like, no, I don't think so. But if you're just putting the book out there and someone writes a review, hey, and again, it's their opinion. So it's so subjective.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
That's the fine line that people don't understand is that, I don't want to berate this point too much, but people think that if you are a New York Times bestseller and you've got a publishing deal with one of the big 5, geez, you're so good. Your book was so good. It deserved to be that. No way in hell is that true because I know so many self-published authors and I've read many of their books that were so well done that sold not zero, but squat copies compared to what the big names sell. Why did they not get the deal? Well, did they not get the agent? Could they not get an agent interested? Because their book is better than what you see a number one New York Times bestsellers. And I have multiple instances of me reading that where I'm like, how does that happen? Well, it's because it's subjective. And ultimately, it's because the publishing industry looks at the book from author ABC and they go, we can make money off that book. That's what it comes down to. And
Right.
maybe it's not the book itself, maybe it's the person behind the book. We can take their reputation because they've done X, Y, and Z in their life. I'll use a generic term, they were a Secret Service agent under Joe Biden and they wrote a book. And it's like, hey, that's something that we can use to market that they're writing a book about a Secret Service agent and this things. Say I had that experience. The Body Man, really did work for the Secret Service, and I wrote the book called The Body Man. Well, the book maybe is not their best book, but if the publishing industry goes, well, Eric actually was the body man for was a Secret Service agent for 3 presidents. He was on protective detail. That all of a sudden gives them massive clout where they can market the heck out of my background.
For
And
sure.
Joe consumer out there, if they're going to read a book by a Secret Service agent who's writing about a Secret Service agent, or me, a financial analyst who's writing about a Secret Service agent, well, I'm gonna see what the Secret Service agent says as well, because he probably is gonna be pretty accurate versus the financial analyst probably just made a lot of crap up. Um,
Yeah.
but I got a lot right though. But I made up a bunch. So I get it. And again, it's a business decision because the publishing industry doesn't care about you in the sense of they care about the dollar signs that you can bring to them. And I'm not saying that as they're just this ruthless group, not at all. I appreciate the publishing industry, but you've got to say it from their perspective. Their perspective is how do we get profits from this? Not how do we make people feel good? And hey, if we're going to lose $1 million, that's okay. It's a really good story. No, they want to profit $1 million, even if it's
Correct.
not so good of a story. So
Yeah.
I don't know. It's crazy business. It's a crazy business to try to make a living. Again, what we talked about before, fortunately for us and for myself in particular, I don't have to like this. If breach of trust doesn't sell great, um, I can still eat dinner. As long as my 9 to 5 job doesn't.
And you can still tell the rest of the story you want to tell. Like there's no, it's on you to put your story out there. There's
Yeah,
no,
which is intimidating in a way, but again, that's why I bring in a professional editor. That's why my cover guy is amazing. I'm about to give him an idea for my cover, or have him do a cover for my fall release. In the next couple weeks, I'm going to reach out to him. Um, and that's why I bring in like what I did with the Body Man's handlers, because the publisher wasn't tied to breach of trust. I wanted everyday people that read this stuff to kick the tires and say, okay, does this have what it needs to compete with all the big names? And hands down, every single person that replied, 13 out of the 14 that got back to me, um, said yes. So that kind of gives you that thing. But yeah, it's all comes down to you just coming out with a great story, and you get to tell your own story, which I think that's invaluable. Like, one of the criticisms I had early on for the Body Man, I don't know if it was a criticism, but maybe why I wasn't getting a publisher, generated interest early on, was people said, well, maybe in the Body Man, the Body Man's is a main character, but it's not the only main character, and so much of it is happening with other people. Maybe you need to just tell the story from the perspective of just the Body Man's role. And I'm like, well, that's not what I want to do. That's the problem. I've got this creative idea, and maybe you're telling me I can market it better if the Body Man is the only protagonist. But I want a world. I want to create, and that's why I've intentionally done it the way I've done it. Where the Body Man and the characters that are in there, I can do other things with. Breach of trust. The Body Man does take on a bigger role, but I also bring in a new character. I have a counterpart for the Body Man and a couple new characters, and some of the older characters that were in the Body Man are there, but in a small degree. And why am I doing that? Well, it's because I'm giving them their own world in the future. And what I'm trying to do is also tie all these in, because I'd love for someone to read the Body Man books and be like, "Oh, look, there's a reference to the Omega Group. What's the Omega Group?" Okay, and the Omega Group has a reference back to a future Body Man book. Um, I like the creativity side of that, and I like the challenge of how do I marry these two worlds because they're happening at the same time. How do I make them happen together? So
yeah, I love it.
yeah. So what
Love.
what what is next for we're talking about Eric Bishop for too long. So what's next with John Guarnieri? And Cult of Machete was
Yeah, so that
just the start,
that's just the
the
start. So
intro.
Cult of Machete is from the brain of Chris Cochran, the creator, Chris Machete. Uh, and so the Cult of Machete is basically, it's almost like a hodgepodge of different short horror stories, like thriller, creep show, tales from the dark side type stuff. Anthology basically. And I basically introduced people, the first one, to an event that happens in the main story I have of called Stay Hungry, which is this horror action piece set at the end of World War II, very supernatural, very rich in horror, where I don't want to give too much away, but basically the first event you get used to, you already established those werewolves running around
Mhm,
Germany at the end of the war, and so you're trying to figure out like what's going on. And then in Cult of Machete Part Two, you're gonna get a part two of Stay Hungry, and then there'll be an announcement after that. And Chris is probably gonna shoot me for saying this, but you'll basically get a release date for the entire first arc of Stay Hungry, which will basically be 6 to 7 actual books in one big book. Um, where the first arc is like this part of the story is kind of covered, and then last night I started writing ideas out for arcs 2 and 3.
mhm,
Like similar what you do, introducing characters, bringing fleshing out characters that were kind of throwaway characters from the first arc, and bringing it into like this, making this whole big deal. But yeah, it's the language, the uniforms, the weaponry, um, locations. It's all based seeped in fact,
mhm.
with what was used at the era. But obviously, with the horror and supernatural, I can create a whole new world here where these people are kind of band together and kind of go and do this mission. So it's very much like Dirty Dozen meets Dusk Till Dawn. I would say the first arc is in terms of the quiet moments are quiet, but then when it gets batshit crazy, it's like this last part. I just can't wait to see Chris do it. It's so insane, um, with the violence and gore, but it's to what I said earlier, create new ways for something to happen to people. It's been super fun for me.
Mhm.
Um, all while establishing this world and different characters that live in it. All will kind of play against the troop, the idea of not all Germans are Nazis, and not all allied people are good people. And so playing with those themes there and stuff, and it's been a blast. And that's kind of gonna do its own thing and be its own comic.
Hmm.
I wrote another short story that he'll put in there that has no, it's just completely different about the storm of the beaches of Normandy, but it's very horror tied to PTSD. Um, but yeah, just
Have
doing
you ever
that.
been to the beach? Ever been to the beaches?
I've been there, yeah,
You have been there. Okay.
yeah. It's tough to even describe it.
Yeah.
So doing that, and then just kind of fleshing out that world there. I have a bunch of short stories I've written over the years that I might just go through and just send off to him, and he can just do like a one-off type thing.
Hmm.
But yeah, working on that, and then working on another short story. That's part of a bigger project that you and I are involved with. That
Hmm.
I got another aspect of that last night from another person that I sent off to another person to look at how it fits into our thing. And then started to slowly get back into the world. This other thing we're working on, you and I, and yeah, it's just a lot. And I've been working on my picture stuff, and I'm gonna start getting to more painting stuff, as it pertains to like the comic book stuff. I'm trying to visualize certain stuff. It helps
Hmm.
me write. But yeah, then work is work, and it's just the podcast stuff is kicking off to a whole nother level. It's getting super busy, and so it's all good. And we are unfortunate to have Taylor Two Scribes on the Spirit Talk channel, and it's only getting bigger, and
Yeah. Well, we
it's
got
pretty rad.
you've also started airing with Eric Bass. You've got Taco Tuesdays, which
Yep.
you guys are my Tuesday, not every week. Some weeks with the kids, something might pop up. Like I'm on summer schedule now. So Tuesdays, not every Tuesday I'm free. Typically, Mondays and Tuesdays are non custody days during the regular school year. So Tuesdays, I try to time getting to the gym right around 7:30, so I can, you guys keep me pushing and probably laughing out loud where the people are like, what's wrong with this idiot? But I love what you guys are doing. I love the depth of it, the degree of what you guys dive into between you and Eric. I think there's just a need for having kind of those conversations, especially yourself and Eric. It's not surface stuff. You're kind of diving into, and you even say it in the podcast, you're just two guys talking.
Yeah.
You don't have PhD degrees in astrophysics and any kind of this other stuff. But that's the amazing thing about this time in history is you don't need that now. We have wealth of knowledge available to us, and
Yeah.
then we just have to filter through whether it's like legit, we believe it's probably legit information, or is it, misinformation from, some foreign entity to try to, obstruct our elections?
Right. No, it's there's no planning for us. Like we just jump in there and just go into it. So it's been super rad. The irony of that is this past week I've had my biggest episode with Taco Tuesdays, and you had your biggest episode on Tale to Scribes with Chris Machete Comics. So
Yeah.
big things happening.
Big thing.
It's awesome. If you're
Well,
not part of the Spirit Talk family, you should be, and if you don't become part of the family, I'm just gonna punch you in the face. So save some time and energy. Don't make me sweat. Just jump in there.
he'll
Let's go.
he'll give you a ticket to a concert. He'll stand by the back door and he'll just punch you in the face and hand you the ticket and then
Yeah,
punch you
that's
in
the concert. Me hitting you in the face.
the line just turns
No.
around and goes right back to the parking lot. Like,
Yeah.
thank you for
Yeah.
visiting Guarnieri
Wow,
Industries.
we got 50 people out here. This is awesome. No, but in all
Like,
seriousness, I think I know time and energy is a lot for people, and for them to dedicate when Spear Talk, Strong Enough, Tale of Two Scribes, and when those all start firing off at the same time, I mean, you're looking anywhere from 6 to 8 hours a week
Yeah.
that people dedicate to the channel, and so I don't take that for granted. I love
No, you don't.
everyone's support. I love all the comments, the messages, the likes, the shares. It makes what we do fun. At least for me, it does. I know with you, and so
100%.
I uh, I love it. I love introducing people to new people, whether it's different backgrounds and careers, and people have fun and it can be support one another and just learn about different people's backgrounds. So yeah, it's been fucking rad.
Yep, 100%. So I want to make sure I get the website right. We'll have it'll be here on the thing. So for anyone listening to this that hasn't gone out and got the Cult of Machete, you can go to machetecomics.ca. We'll put it on the screen there. So you need to pick up the issue before it sells out. If it
Yeah,
does.
so the first run, all the pre-order stuff sold out, which is
Right.
insane. And then the first run of physical comics was, I think, 500 comics,
Yes.
which is already, I think it's over 300 sold already.
Hmm.
And then you can get a digital copy, which is unlimited, which globally it's awesome because you can, while you can't maybe not get the physical aspect of it, you can still own the digital copy of it.
Right.
Um, yeah, so yeah, that's and then with that first line, the first 500 sells out physical. There would be a second run of a different cover that comes out. So
Yep.
keep buying them out, people.
Yep. Awesome. Yes, do that, and then we'll have some other cool stuff to talk about in the future that's we're hard at work at, but we're enjoying every aspect. For myself, Breach of Trust is out, and you can get the ebook, the paperback, or hardcover. Simplest way to do it is probably going to Amazon and type in Breach of Trust Eric Bishop, and it'll pop up. You can go to my website. I'll have it up. I'll have copies up by the end of June for for sale for physical paperback and hardcover. But my website is ericpbishop.com. And I'll have copies of all three books. And yeah, I'll do a bundle. So if people want like whether the paperbacks or hardcovers of any of the three, which are all behind my head there, at the end of the month, yeah, I'll bundle and save you some money to get all three for sure, or combos or whatever. Just the ability to have your words out there and your stories out there. And I know I mentioned that a lot when I'm doing a Tale of Two Scribes. Of for me, it's a legacy thing where I know at some point my time on Earth will come to an end, and unless the EMP has gone off and the global carnage has happened of the nuclear war they say might be coming, which I don't think is actually coming, there'll be copies of my books that'll long outlast me. And it's kind of like what I said earlier in the story of if you want to know who I am as a person, the story there's little glimpses and hints, and I know same for you, but also read my acknowledgments. That's where I lay it out. That's where I give my thanks. That's where I tell people that I appreciate, and I get to tell the story behind why I wrote that particular story in the acknowledgments as well. So the fact that those things are gonna, that are out there, because as you know, you work so hard to do some of these things, and then be able to get it out there. Above all, it's a blessing,
Yeah.
and to know it will be out there for indefinite period of time is pretty darn cool. So publicly, since we're on this together, John, I know I've said this privately, but thank you for giving me the opportunity to host my own show, to bring on guests. I was involved in a podcast years ago, and I enjoyed the process of talking to people. But to me, to be able to bring on guests and just talk about the craft and to really learn about how they like having, Chris on the other day. I love comics, but I didn't understand the process behind it and the creativity of that. He went and got a degree for all that.
Yeah.
Fascinating. It's fascinating. And again, end this on the note of the more you know, the more you put yourself out there, the more you interact with people, more opportunities open up. And you don't know where they're going to lead to. So take a risk, put your remote down, watch minimal television, and go create.
Correct.
Cool. Thank you, my
Thanks,
friend.
buddy. Yep.